Here is a question that most of us never think to ask, but once you do, it lingers like a riddle you can't unhear. If the voice in your head wasn't yours, would you still trust it? But neuroscience and philosophy now suggest that a huge part of what you hear inside isn't coming from you at all. Your mind might actually be ghostwriting your reality, stitching together thoughts from culture, memory, and algorithms, making you believe they're you. Think about that for a second. Every time you hear yourself thinking, commenting, judging, planning, regretting, what if that inner voice isn't really you? We walk around assuming our thoughts are private, original, and self-generated. But pause for a moment and really listen. Who is speaking when your mind says, "I'm not good enough," or "I can't do this," or even, "I'm amazing"? Is that your authentic self, or an echo chamber of everything you've ever heard, read, feared, or hoped? We treat our internal monologue as sacred, as the essence of who we are. But the truth is, most of us never stop to question its origin. Neuroscience is the scientific study of the nervous system, including the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. It explores how these systems work to produce thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And here's where it gets really strange. Neuroscience now tells us that a large percentage of our thoughts appear spontaneously, without conscious intention. They just show up. You don't plan your next thought, do you? It appears like a whisper from nowhere, but then automatically you identify with it. You say, "This is my thought," and boom, it becomes part of your reality. But what if your mind is more like a radio than a narrator? A receiver, not a generator, picking up signals from memory, emotion, culture, trauma, even your phone notifications, each layered into a convincing stream of consciousness that you mistakenly call me. In this conversation, we're going to gently but thoroughly unmask that inner voice. We'll explore what science says about thought generation, how ancient philosophies have always seen the mind as a tool, not an identity, and how your social environment might be scripting your internal dialogue more than you think. We'll move through the wisdom of Buddhist teachings, the implications of quantum physics, the symbolic influence of culture, and even the role digital algorithms play in shaping your sense of self. But let's be clear from the start. This isn't about shutting down the mind. It's about seeing it clearly, becoming the observer instead of the echo. So here's your first invitation. The next time your mind speaks up, ask. Not aggressively, not skeptically, but curiously, who said that? And more importantly, who's listening? Let's begin the unraveling. The narrative illusion and how brains ghostwrite you. Ghostwriting is to write something for someone else who then takes credit for it. In this video, I'm suggesting that the mind or brain is creating thoughts that you then claim as your own, but their origin isn't truly you. Most people walk around carrying a silent assumption that their thoughts are self-authored, that the stream of words playing in the mind is somehow a reflection of a solid, singular me. But here's the twist. What we think of as our internal narrator may actually be more like a ghostwriter, stitching together borrowed lines from culture, memory, language, and even unconscious habits. Cognitive science is an interdisciplinary field that studies the mind and its processes, including perception, thinking, memory, and learning, often drawing on psychology, linguistics, artificial intelligence, philosophy, and neuroscience. Cognitive science has revealed something startling. The brain doesn't produce thought in a tidy, conscious sequence. Instead, it works like a nonlinear film editor, splicing together fragments of memory, sensory input, and expectation to generate what feels like a coherent story. This process is central to what Thomas Metzinger describes in the ego tunnel, a term that doesn't just sound sci-fi, but genuinely reflects the illusion we live inside of. The ego is not a thing we possess, it's a virtual interface, a constructed perspective that simplifies the overwhelm and complexity of the world into a digestible experience. It's not false, but it's not the whole truth either. Thomas Metzinger is a German philosopher known for his work on the mind, consciousness, and the self. In his book, The Ego Tunnel, he argues that the self is not a real entity, but a constructed mental model, or tunnel, that the brain creates to represent reality. Sam Harris once asked a deceptively simple question. You are not controlling the next thought that emerges in your mind. So where is the author? That's a question that rattles the foundation of the ego illusion. If you're not the one choosing your next thought, how can you claim to be the thinker? This is where philosophy meets social psychology. Sam Harris is an American philosopher, neuroscientist, author, and podcast host. He often writes about topics like consciousness, free will, ethics, and religion from a scientific and skeptical perspective, questioning conventional ideas about the self. Pierre Bourdieu's notion of habitus explains how social conditioning becomes embodied, how our thoughts, preferences, and even inner language are shaped by our cultural context, long before we ever become aware of it. You're not just born into a family, you're born into an entire symbolic system: norms, stories, pronouns, rules of expression that begin scripting your sense of identity from day one. And language, it isn't neutral. Pierre Bourdieu was a French sociologist and philosopher. His concept of habitus refers to the deeply ingrained habits, skills, and dispositions that we possess due to our life experiences, particularly our social and cultural background. It shapes our perceptions, thoughts, and actions, often unconsciously. Semiotics is the study of signs and symbols and their interpretation. It examines how meaning is created and communicated through language, images, gestures, and other forms of representation within a culture. Semiotics shows us that every word carries cultural weight. Your inner voice isn't just narrating, it's interpreting your life using symbols handed to you by society. So when your mind says, "I failed," or "I'm unlovable," it might just be translating a collective belief into personal pain. It's wild to consider, but your internal monologue, the thing you've trusted as you, may in fact be a collaborative screenplay written by evolution, culture, media, and memory. And you, the real you, might not be the narrator at all, but the one quietly listening behind the words, the observer, the witness. And that subtle shift from thinking you're the voice to realizing you're the awareness behind it is the beginning of real freedom. Now let's step through a more unusual lens, one that bridges science and spirituality. Let's look at how quantum physics and Buddhism might be pointing to the same strange truth, that the self we think is so solid might not even exist. Quantum physics is a fundamental theory in physics that describes the properties and behavior of matter and energy at the smallest scales, such as atoms and subatomic particles. It introduces concepts like superposition, particles existing in multiple states at once, and the role of the observer. Buddhism is an ancient Indian religion and philosophy based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Key concepts include the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, impermanence, suffering, dukkha, and the idea of no self, anatta. Quick pause here. If exploring these ideas is sparking something for you, please subscribe and hit the like button. And sharing one quick thought in the comments helps this conversation reach more people. Thanks for your support. Now back to the video. Remember, you are born spiritual. The quantum mirror, physics, Buddhism, and the vanishing self. Imagine looking in a mirror that reflects not just your face, but your very existence, and finding nothing solid looking back. That's the unsettling but enlightening space where quantum physics and ancient Buddhist teachings intersect. At the heart of both lies a quietly radical idea. The self we cling to is not a stable entity, but more like a flickering event, a mirage generated moment to moment depending on observation. Bruce Rosenblum and Fred Kuttner are physicists who wrote the book Quantum Enigma: Physics Encounters Consciousness, to explore the puzzling relationship between quantum mechanics and consciousness, suggesting that observation by a conscious being might play a role in collapsing quantum possibilities into definite outcomes. Quantum mechanics is another term for quantum physics, the branch of physics dealing with the behavior of matter and energy at the atomic and subatomic levels, where classical physics breaks down. In the book Quantum Enigma: Physics Encounters Consciousness, Rosenblum and Kuttner explore a strange phenomenon in quantum mechanics. Particles behave differently when observed. Until they're measured, they exist in a state of possibility, multiple potential realities stacked together. But once observed, they snap into one version of reality. What collapses the possibilities into a single outcome? The observer. And that raises a philosophical bombshell. Is consciousness not only aware of reality, but somehow entangled in its creation? The doctrine of anatta, or no self, is a central teaching in Buddhism, particularly Theravada Buddhism, which states that there is no permanent, unchanging, independent self or soul, Atman, existing in living beings. Instead, what we perceive as the self is a temporary collection of physical and mental components. Buddhism has been whispering this truth for over 2,000 years. The doctrine of anatta, or no self, teaches that the idea of a fixed identity is an illusion. There is no enduring essence behind your thoughts or actions, just momentary conditions giving rise to experience. Thich Nhat Hanh called this interbeing, the understanding that everything exists only in relation to everything else. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, peace activist, and author. He was a globally influential figure in the mindfulness movement and taught extensively on the concept of interbeing, emphasizing the interconnectedness of all things. You are not separate from your breath, your ancestors, your culture, or the earth beneath your feet. You are an ever-changing pattern in the field of life. These aren't just abstract ideas. They point to something directly observable in your own experience. Watch your thoughts closely, and you'll notice they don't arrive in a flowing stream. They flicker. They appear in discrete bursts, sometimes with gaps between them, just like quantum events. And here's the kicker. You can't predict what the next one will be. You don't know where it will come from or even what form it will take. That gap, the space before a thought arises, is where witness consciousness lives, silent, still, untouched. This recognition dissolves the illusion of continuity. We cling to the ego, saying, I am a story. But what if there is no story? Only spontaneous pages appearing in a cosmic scrapbook. This realization isn't meant to disorient you. It's meant to free you. You are not the character being written. You are the awareness noticing the script, the screen on which the movie of mind plays. The teachings of the Vimalakirti Sutra capture this perfectly. The self is like an illusion, like a dream, a shadow, a reflection. And just like quantum waves, it only seems solid when you're not paying attention. The teachings of the Vimalakirti Sutra is a popular Mahayana Buddhist text that features the lay practitioner Vimalakirti, who demonstrates a profound understanding of emptiness and non-duality. It emphasizes that wisdom and liberation are not limited to monastics and explores the nature of reality and the bodhisattva path. So the next time you try to pin down who you are, try this instead. Don't answer the question. Watch it dissolve. Because in the space where identity vanishes, something more profound begins to shine through. Not the ego, not the story, but the field of awareness itself. Let's look now at how society helps script the very language of our inner world and why even our most private thoughts might be cultural performances. Scripts on the skin, Butler, semiotics, and social identities. Let's imagine for a moment that your thoughts were written on your skin instead of whispered in your head. Every belief, doubt, label, and inner sentence visible for the world to read. You might notice something unsettling. Much of what's written there didn't originate from within you. It was written onto you by society, culture, even algorithms. Judith Butler is an American philosopher and gender theorist. In Excitable Speech, she examines the power of language to injure and to perform identities, arguing that identity is not something fixed, but is performatively constructed through repetitive acts of speaking and being recognized within social norms. Judith Butler, in her compelling book Excitable Speech, makes a bold but vital claim. Identity is always a performance with no originality. What we call I is often just a role we've rehearsed so well we forget we were ever cast in it. From the way we say I'm a success to I'm not lovable, much of this self-description follows scripts we've absorbed through repetition. Our gender, our tone, even our inner affirmations. All of these are shaped by the codes we've learned to repeat. This is where semiotics comes in, the study of signs, symbols, and how they create meaning. Every word we think and speak carries layers of social imprint. For example, when your mind says, I should be more productive, that thought likely isn't coming from some deep, eternal truth. It's more likely echoing a capitalist work ethic encoded in the media, school systems, or family expectations. These are what French semiotician Roland Barthes called myths, socially constructed ideas dressed up as universal truths. Even the language your mind uses to describe itself, emojis, hashtags, self-labels, is often imported. These signs don't just express who we are, they form who we think we are. A teenager scrolling through curated posts on social media may begin to unconsciously rehearse not just outer behavior, but inner thought patterns modeled by influencers. The mental narrator begins mimicking the cultural signals around it. That voice in your head? It might be half you and half the algorithm. French semiotician Roland Barthes was a French literary critic, essayist, and semiotician. He analyzed how signs and symbols in culture, including language, fashion, and food, create meaning and often perpetuate societal myths, ideas that are presented as natural or universal, but are actually culturally constructed. This is why Butler's work is so important. She shows that identity isn't a static object. It's a script written in response to societal pressures, and it's repeatable, which means it can also be rewritten. That's the power of awareness. When you catch the inner dialogue repeating a cultural trope, like real men don't cry or I'm too old to change, you can stop, look closer, and ask, who benefits from this thought? Is this my truth? Or a viral meme that's taken up residence in my mind? From the perspective of spiritual psychology, this awareness practice is profound. The more you observe these mental scripts, the more you recognize that the voice in your head often speaks in someone else's accent. It's not your essence, it's your conditioning. And once you realize that identity is performative, not inherent, something incredible opens up: the freedom to choose new performances. You're no longer a character locked into a single role. You can switch scripts, speak new lines, or even, in moments of stillness, say nothing at all. Now let's explore how far back this scripting goes, into the ancient wiring of our tribal minds and the digital personas we now wear like masks. Tribal brains, digital personas, and the evolution of the ego. Long before we curated digital avatars and cultivated our personal brands, we were huddled around fires, watching each other's eyes for cues, decoding tone, posture, and silence. The modern self, the one you think is speaking in your head, has ancient roots. It was shaped to survive in tribes, not tweets. And understanding this matters because your ego didn't begin as a storyteller. It began as a protector. Matthew Lieberman, in his fascinating book, Social: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect, explains that the brain treats social rejection as physical pain. That's how hardwired our need for belonging is. The ego then evolved not just to help us survive lions or starvation, but to keep us in the good graces of our group. Matthew Lieberman is a social neuroscientist. In his fascinating book, Social: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect, he explores the evolutionary and neural basis of human social behavior, arguing that our need for social connection is as fundamental as our need for food or shelter, and that the brain is specifically wired for social interaction. It narrates constantly to ensure we're behaving correctly based on the rules we've internalized over time. This survival mechanism grew more sophisticated, learning to wear masks appropriate to each environment. At work, you're polished. With friends, relaxed. Online, curated. But behind each of these is the same ego desperately working to keep you accepted. Slavoj Žižek once said, "The truest obscenity is the obviousness of the self." In other words, what feels most real about you is often the most socially constructed. We rarely question how much of what we think or feel is just an ancient strategy playing dress-up in modern clothes. The fear of being disliked? Ancient. The urge to post the perfect selfie? Just a digital update of that primal script. Evolutionary psychology reveals that when the ego feels threatened by rejection, change, or failure, it doesn't become more flexible. Slavoj Žižek is a Slovenian philosopher and cultural critic. Known for his complex and often provocative analysis drawing on Lacanian psychoanalysis, Marxism, and popular culture, he often critiques the illusions and ideologies that shape our sense of self and reality. It hardens like a turtle under stress. It retreats into what's safe and familiar. This is why disidentifying with the ego feels so hard. It's not just psychological, it's evolutionary. The voice in your head telling you not to speak up, not to be different, not to change. That's an echo from the Paleolithic warning: don't get exiled. But here's the glitch in the system. In a hyper-connected world, the tribal brain gets confused. The algorithm becomes the new elder. A like becomes approval, a trend becomes law, and suddenly your internal narrator begins speaking with a voice trained not by wisdom or soul, but by digital feedback loops. What was once about survival now becomes about validation, and the ego, ever the shapeshifter, adapts again, becoming not just a voice, but an influencer. So here's the key insight. Your ego is not naturally fluid. It's adaptive under trust, but under threat, it clings to identity like armor. The task, then, isn't to kill the ego, but to see through its reflexes, to question its motives, and to remember that its oldest programming is based on a world we no longer live in. The ancient self model was built to protect you, but the modern world asks something deeper. It asks you to see through protection and into presence, and that's where transformation begins. Paleolithic is the early period of the Stone Age, a prehistoric era characterized by the development of the first stone tools. In this video's context, It refers to the ancient evolutionary period during which core human survival instincts and social behaviors developed. Next, let's look at the surprising science showing how you can actually reshape this inner narrator and even influence how your story is written on a biological level. Neuroplasticity and epigenetics, editing the autobiography in real time. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change and adapt throughout life by forming new neural connections. This means the brain is not fixed but can be reorganized in response to learning, experience, or even injury. Epigenetics is the study of changes in gene expression that are caused by factors other than alterations in the DNA sequence itself. These changes can be influenced by environment, lifestyle, and experiences, suggesting that how we live can affect which genes are turned on or off. Here's something incredible to consider. The voice in your head is not fixed. It's editable. The story it tells can be rewritten, not just psychologically, but biologically. For centuries, we were taught that the brain is like concrete. It's set early and doesn't change. But today, science says otherwise. Your mind is more like clay, shaped daily by what you think, feel, eat, and even believe. Norman Doidge's remarkable book, The Brain That Changes Itself. Norman Doidge is a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and author. In The Brain That Changes Itself, he popularized the science of neuroplasticity through compelling stories of individuals who have retrained their brains to overcome various challenges, demonstrating the brain's remarkable capacity for change. Norman Doidge's remarkable book, The Brain That Changes Itself, brings us directly into the world of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself throughout life. New neural pathways can be formed with intention, repetition, and awareness, which means the mental narrator you hear on loop, especially the one filled with self-doubt, fear, or shame, can be softened, reshaped, and even replaced. Every time you catch a thought and choose a new one, you're not just thinking differently, you're sculpting your brain differently, and it goes deeper. Epigenetics, the study of how behaviors and environment can affect how genes express themselves, reveals that even our biology responds to awareness. Andrew Weil is an American physician and author known for his work in integrative medicine, which combines conventional and alternative therapies. He emphasizes the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit, and promotes lifestyle interventions like diet, exercise, and mindfulness for health and well-being. Andrew Weil's integrative medicine approach combines this cutting-edge science with ancient healing systems. He shows how diet, movement, breathwork, and meditation don't just help you feel better. They can literally switch on and off certain genes. Your inner voice is wired into your nervous system, and that nervous system responds to lifestyle, not just thoughts. Meditation, for instance, isn't just spiritual fluff. It's now one of the most well-researched practices in neuroscience. Long-term mindfulness practice has been shown to increase gray matter density in areas of the brain related to self-regulation and compassion, while reducing activity in the default mode network. Mindfulness practice is a mental training practice that involves focusing your attention on the present moment without judgment. This can include meditation, mindful breathing, or simply bringing non-judgmental awareness to everyday activities. That's the one creating that mental narrator in the first place. In essence, mindfulness turns the volume down on the ego and up on the silent witness. Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence adds another dimension, emotional literacy. Our ability to name, track, and shift our inner state teaches us that we don't have to control every thought, but we can influence their likelihood, like changing the climate in a room to make storms less common. Through awareness, you're actually influencing the probability field of your thoughts. Daniel Goleman is an American psychologist and science journalist. He is best known for his work on emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage one's own emotions, as well as recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. This is why awareness practices matter. Simple things like cyclic sighing, chakra-focused breathing, even eating in silence aren't just rituals. They are neurobiological interventions. You are literally rewriting the conditions of your consciousness, and with time, that internal voice begins to speak in a new tone, gentler, clearer, truer. So the next time you think, I am just this way, remember the story can be edited. The narrator can be retrained. The brain can change its voice. And in doing so, you begin to change not just your thoughts, but your entire reality. Now let's stretch that even further. What happens when the narrator is turned off completely? When the self isn't just questioned, but disappears entirely? Chakras are energy centers in the body. According to various Eastern spiritual traditions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism. Chakra-focused breathing involves directing breath and awareness to specific points in the body associated with these energy centers, often as a meditative or energy balancing practice. Neurobiological interventions are practices or treatments that affect the brain and nervous system on a biological level, such as breathwork influencing the vagus nerve. Welcome to the strange frontier of altered states, shattered mirrors, psychedelics, lucid dreaming, and past life windows. Psychedelics are a class of psychoactive substances that can produce profound alterations in perception, mood, and cognitive processes, sometimes leading to experiences described as mystical or spiritual, including the dissolution of the sense of self. Lucid dreaming is a state of dreaming in which the dreamer is aware that they are dreaming. In lucid dreams, the dreamer may gain some level of control over the dream's narrative and environment. Have you ever woken up from a dream so vivid, so emotionally intense, that it took you a moment to remember who you were? That eerie space between dreaming and waking offers a clue to something deeper. Your sense of self is not as permanent as it feels. In fact, under certain conditions, it can disappear entirely. And what emerges instead can be shocking, terrifying, or transcendent. In Breaking Open the Head, Daniel Pinchbeck recounts his initiation into the world of plant medicine, particularly through ayahuasca ceremonies. These ancient rituals, practiced in the Amazon for generations, aren't recreational. They are spiritual surgeries, and what many participants report is astonishingly consistent. The sudden absence of the I. The voice is gone. Daniel Pinchbeck is an American author and journalist interested in psychedelics, shamanism, and consciousness. In Breaking Open the Head, he recounts his personal explorations with various psychedelic substances and indigenous plant medicines, reflecting on their potential to alter consciousness and perception of reality. Ayahuasca is a potent psychoactive brew traditionally used by indigenous peoples of the Amazon basin for spiritual and healing purposes. Ayahuasca ceremonies are ritualistic gatherings led by a shaman or facilitator where participants drink the brew to induce altered states of consciousness. The narrator silenced. What remains is pure perception, raw awareness, or in some cases, contact with something entirely beyond ordinary consciousness. Bruce Goldberg's work on regression therapy opens yet another strange doorway. His patients under hypnosis report memories not just from childhood, but from lives they have no way of remembering. Stories that unfold with detail, emotional texture, and deep personal insight. Whether or not one believes in literal past lives, these altered states reveal a truth that modern psychology is just beginning to grapple with. The ego is not the only mode of self. It's one mask among many. Bruce Goldberg is an American hypnotherapist and author known for his work in past life regression therapy. He claims to help patients access memories of previous lives through hypnosis, suggesting that consciousness or aspects of the self may persist beyond a single lifetime. Robert Monroe was an American businessman who founded the Monroe Institute, known for its research into altered states of consciousness. He developed audio technologies, such as HemiSync, to facilitate out-of-body experiences and explore non-ordinary states of awareness. Robert Monroe's pioneering research into out-of-body experiences at his Virginia-based lab pushes this even further. Using sound frequencies to trigger altered states, Monroe discovered that consciousness can function without the body and without identity. In those states, the internal monologue doesn't just quiet down, it ceases, and what's revealed in its place is often described as archetypal or even transpersonal, a field of awareness that feels ancient, non-local, and intimately connected to all things. Jungian perspective means relating to the theories of Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist and the founder of analytical psychology. The Jungian perspective emphasizes the importance of the unconscious mind, archetypes, universal symbolic patterns, and the process of individuation, psychological development towards a whole self. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who was initially a close associate of Sigmund Freud, but later developed his own theories. He introduced concepts such as the collective unconscious, archetypes, the anima and animus, and psychological types. From a Jungian perspective, these experiences aren't hallucinations. They're encounters with the collective unconscious, a realm where personal identity dissolves and deeper archetypes rise to the surface. Carl Jung called these symbols the language of the soul, and they show up in dreams, visions, and psychedelic journeys. Sometimes the voice in your head isn't yours or even human. Sometimes it's a fragment of the divine wearing a symbolic mask. What's fascinating is how these altered states, Ayahuasca journeys, lucid dreams, deep hypnosis consistently report the same thing. The self is not fixed. It's more like a tuning dial. Turn it slightly, and you're someone else. Turn it further, and there is no one left. Just a witnessing field, observing experience with no need to explain it. This isn't about escaping reality. It's about expanding the model. Your ordinary self, your ego, your inner chatter. It's one version of you, but it's not the only version. And in learning to access these other states, you begin to loosen the grip of the default voice in your head. The next question becomes, what happens when you stop trying to rise above the body and instead sink into it, fully conscious, only with reverence? That's where true witnessing begins. In stillness, in silence, in the flesh. Let's step into that now. Embodied silence, somatic pathways to the witness. Embodied silence is a state of stillness and presence experienced not just mentally, but throughout the physical body. It suggests a form of awareness that is rooted in somatic sensation rather than solely in thought. Somatic pathways refers to the nervous system pathways that relate to the body, soma, including sensory input from the body and motor control. Somatic practices engage these pathways to influence physical and emotional states. It's tempting to think awakening happens somewhere above the neck, through thoughts, revelations, or insights that click. But some of the deepest shifts don't come from thinking at all. They come from sensing, from grounding, from silence that rises up not in the head, but in the body. And this is where many seekers miss the mark. You don't transcend the ego by escaping the body. You transcend it by going through the body. In The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk explains how trauma, memory, and identity are stored in our physical tissues, often beyond the reach of thought. The inner voice you hear, especially in moments of stress or self-sabotage, might not just be a psychological habit. It might be an echo of unprocessed physical memory. Your nervous system remembers what your mind forgets. And often what feels like a gut instinct is actually a trigger wrapped in the language of survival. But this embodied memory also contains the keys to awakening. Bessel van der Kolk is a Dutch-born American psychiatrist and researcher specializing in post-traumatic stress. In The Body Keeps the Score, he explains how trauma is stored not just in the mind but in the body, affecting physiology, emotions, and the sense of self, and explores various somatic therapies for healing. Taoist internal alchemy is a set of Taoist practices that aim to cultivate and transform internal energies, QI, to achieve physical health, longevity, and spiritual immortality. It often involves meditation, breathwork, and visualization focused on energy centers in the body. In Taoist internal alchemy, awareness is centered in the Dan Tian, a point below the navel where energy and stillness converge. Tai Chi is a Chinese martial art practiced for both its defense training and its health benefits. It involves slow, flowing movements and deep breathing, emphasizing balance, relaxation, and the cultivation of internal energy. Qigong is a traditional Chinese practice that involves coordinating slow-flowing movement, deep rhythmic breathing, and calm meditative states. Like Tai Chi, it is practiced for exercise, healing, and meditation, aiming to cultivate and balance life energy. QI. Metaphorical means using language or concepts to represent something else symbolically rather than literally. In this video's context, it distinguishes between a concept that is purely symbolic versus one that has a physiological or observable basis. Vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the autonomic nervous system. It plays a crucial role in regulating various bodily functions, including heart rate, digestion, and breathing, and is strongly linked to emotional regulation and the body's stress response. Tai Chi, Qigong, and other somatic practices use this center as a way to anchor consciousness below mental chatter. And this isn't metaphorical. Modern neuroscience confirms that vagal tone, the responsiveness of the vagus nerve, is directly linked to emotional regulation, calm, and the capacity for present moment awareness. When you breathe slowly, when you move mindfully, when you touch stillness inside the body, you shift the entire landscape of your consciousness. This is why chakra work isn't just esoteric, it's anatomical. Focusing on the heart chakra, for example, activates coherence between heart rhythms and brain waves, a state measurable through HeartMath Institute research. When you practice breathwork into these energy centers, you aren't just feeling spiritual, you're retraining your internal dialogue at the level of the nervous system. Prem Rawat offers a beautiful invitation. Lean into the gap, that space between thoughts. That's where the silent witness lives. And often the doorway to that gap isn't mental, it's somatic. It might appear when you pause before reacting, when you soften your jaw, when you feel your feet instead of following a spiral of thought. The mind loves abstraction, but the body is always now, always real. This is why practices like yoga, tai chi, walking meditation, and even simple grounding rituals are so powerful. They reintroduce you to a consciousness that doesn't speak in words, that doesn't need a narrator, a consciousness that simply is. When you return to this silent presence, something shifts. You begin to notice the voice in your head as a voice, not as you. And that moment of distinction, that's the crack in the illusion. That's where freedom breathes. HeartMath Institute is an organization that conducts research and develops tools and techniques to help people reduce stress and improve emotional well-being by increasing coherence between heart rhythms and brain waves. Prem Rawat is a spiritual teacher who speaks about finding peace and fulfillment within oneself. His message often focuses on the importance of self-knowledge and the possibility of experiencing peace in the present moment, often referred to as the gap between thoughts. Let's keep unraveling. What if even your sense of individuality isn't just yours, but a reflection of the people, energies, and networks around you? Let's explore the collective voice behind the personal one. We space, social neuroscience, and the networked self. We space is a term used in some relational or collective spiritual and psychological contexts to describe the shared field of awareness or consciousness that exists between individuals when they are in genuine connection or resonance with each other. Social neuroscience is an interdisciplinary field that studies how biological systems implement social processes and behavior. It combines methods from neuroscience and social psychology to understand the neural mechanisms underlying social interaction. The networked self is the idea that the individual sense of self is not isolated but is deeply interconnected with and influenced by the social networks, relationships, and collective consciousness it is a part of. So far, we've looked closely at the mind's voice, at how thoughts arise, disappear, and repeat. But here's something even more astonishing. Your thoughts might not be entirely yours at all. In fact, much of what plays in your head is shaped, echoed, and reinforced by the people around you. You're not just a single node of awareness, you're part of a living network. In the book Connected, Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler reveal how our emotions, behaviors, and even health patterns ripple through social webs. If your friend's friend is anxious, you're more likely to feel anxious, even if you've never met that person. Our brains are constantly syncing with others through what neuroscientists call mirror neurons. These are the biological roots of empathy, the reason we wince when someone gets hurt or smile when a baby laughs. But they also suggest something deeper. We are never truly thinking alone. Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler are social scientists known for their research on social networks. In Connected, they explore how everything from happiness and obesity to political views and altruism can spread through social ties, demonstrating the profound influence of our social connections. Susan Blackmore is a British psychologist and writer, known for her work on consciousness, memes, and parapsychology. She is a proponent of memetics, the theory that ideas and cultural practices spread like biological genes. Susan Blackmore, in her work on memes and consciousness, goes even further. She proposes that thoughts spread like viruses, not just through conversation, but through culture itself. Your beliefs, catchphrases, inner criticisms, even your dreams, can be influenced by the dominant memes of your environment. The voice in your head might be partially authored by the internet, by TikTok trends, by political hashtags, by YouTube comments. We're not only sharing content, we're sharing identity blueprints. Now, add to this the perspective of liberation theology, especially thinkers like Cornel West. He challenges the idea that awakening is solely an individual task. In his view, true liberation of the self is bound to the liberation of the collective. In other words, you're not free until we are free, and that includes freeing each other from internalized voices that uphold shame, oppression, and division. Cornel West is an American philosopher, political activist, social critic, and author. His work often integrates elements of Christianity, philosophy, and political radicalism, emphasizing issues of race, justice, and the struggle for liberation. Much of our inner dialogue, especially around worth, guilt, and value, is shaped by the systems we live in. Questioning those voices is a political act, a spiritual act, and a relational one. This interconnectedness doesn't mean your voice is irrelevant. It means it's part of a choir. What we think of as personal consciousness is often group consciousness in disguise. The I in your mind might be carrying the voices of your ancestors, your community, your culture, and your social network, all woven into what feels like a solitary inner dialogue. The implication is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it reveals how susceptible we are to suggestion. Empowering because once you recognize this, you can choose who and what you're tuning into. You can consciously shape your inner ecosystem. Surround yourself with people, practices, and environments that speak in the frequency of truth, presence, and compassion. The we space isn't just out there, it's inside you. And when you begin to recognize the voice of the hive, the collective psyche, something extraordinary happens. The ego's grip weakens, the boundaries soften, and a deeper intelligence begins to speak. Not in isolation, but in resonance. But what happens when even that collective resonance shifts into something non-human, digital, or artificially intelligent? Let's explore what happens to the self when the very tools we use to transcend it begin to shape us in return. Liberation technologies, VR, AI, and the post-human witness. We are now living in an era where the mind doesn't just reflect reality, it increasingly interfaces with a second, digitized one. Virtual reality headsets, AI meditation guides, augmented realities. These aren't speculative tools of the future. They're already reshaping how we experience ourselves. And that raises a profound question. If your sense of self can be modified, extended, or even suspended by technology, who's the real you underneath all that input? David Chalmers is an Australian philosopher specializing in the philosophy of mind and consciousness. In Reality Plus, he argues that virtual worlds are not inherently less real or valuable than physical reality, proposing a concept of ontological pluralism, where different digital realms can constitute genuine realities. David Chalmers, in his groundbreaking book, Reality Plus, suggests that virtual worlds are not inferior to the real world. They're simply different ontological spaces. He argues that conscious experience in VR is just as valid as that in physical reality, provided the quality of experience is preserved. That means your avatar in a digital realm, the ego that navigates that space, isn't fake. It's another expression of consciousness. But here's where it gets philosophical. If you can inhabit multiple selves across platforms, what happens to your core identity? Can we still speak of a single self at all? This is not just theoretical. AI-guided meditation apps are beginning to teach users how to observe thoughts, detach from emotional loops, and even access witness consciousness. In wellness trend reports, like the Enlightenment Journey 2025, tech-enhanced spiritual tools are already being marketed as accelerators for self-inquiry. They use neurofeedback to show you in real time how present or scattered you are. Some even guide you through disidentification processes, literally training your brain to watch itself. Marshall McLuhan, decades before any of this, warned us, "We shape our tools and thereafter they shape us." That's exactly what's happening now. The digital technologies we use to escape the ego are also forming new ego structures: avatars, usernames, curated realities, and behavioral algorithms. Even when you think you're just scrolling, your identity is being nudged, edited, subtly reconstructed by a million micro-interactions. But here's the twist. These same tools can also be used to reprogram the internal narrator. Virtual reality environments designed for mindfulness can create immersive silence. Brainwave entertainment audio can tune you to frequencies associated with transcendence. AI companions can gently interrupt negative thought loops and remind you to breathe. Technology, when used with conscious intent, can become not a distraction from presence, but a doorway into it. Of course, this demands vigilance, because when the voice in your head starts echoing artificial patterns, the line between thought and programming becomes razor thin. The challenge is not to reject these tools, but to engage with them as conscious beings, not passive consumers. The post-human witness is not a science fiction concept. It's already emerging. A self that knows how to operate in both the physical and digital dimensions without getting lost in either. A presence that sees the self as a flexible interface, not a fixed identity. Marshall McLuhan was a Canadian philosopher and communication theorist. He is famous for coining the phrase, "the medium is the message," arguing that the form of a medium, like television or the internet, is more significant than the content it carries in shaping society and human consciousness. And that leads us into a very practical question. If everything we've said so far is true, then what can you do, every single day, to stay rooted in the real awareness beneath it all? Let's bring the conversation down to earth now, into the rituals and habits that anchor the witness. Daily praxis, rituals that keep the witness awake. Praxis means practice or action, especially when it is informed by theory. Daily praxis refers to consistent, intentional practices or rituals performed regularly as a way of living out one's understanding or principles, such as daily meditation or journaling to cultivate awareness. Sam Harris's book, Waking Up: A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion, explores the nature of consciousness and offers a secular approach to spiritual practices like meditation. He emphasizes that insights about the self and reality are accessible through direct experience, not necessarily through religious belief. For all the mind-bending insights we've explored, from quantum flickers of the self to digital avatars of the ego, awakening is not a mystical event locked away in some distant retreat. It happens here, in the quiet, consistent rituals of daily life, not through force, but through remembrance. Because in truth, the witness isn't something you achieve, it's something you stop forgetting. Sam Harris, in Waking Up, reminds us that spiritual awakening doesn't require new beliefs. It requires looking at what's already present right now, before your next thought forms. That presence, that noticing, is the seed of everything else. But because the inner narrator is so compulsive, you need gentle practices to interrupt its autopilot, to remember the awareness behind the noise. Let's begin with breath. One of the simplest, most neurologically powerful practices is the cyclic sigh, a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. Research from Stanford's Andrew Huberman shows this breath triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, calming the body and restoring clarity to the mind. Just a few rounds, anytime, anywhere, can return you to witness consciousness without effort or philosophy. Next, consider a micro-inquiry that can become a quiet companion throughout your day. Who is aware right now? Don't answer it, just ask. The mind may offer a concept, a name, a role, but awareness itself has no label. By asking the question, you're redirecting attention from the content of consciousness to the context, the silent field in which thoughts arise. And in the evening, a digital detox ritual, not a dramatic purge, but a gentle boundary. Stanford's Andrew Huberman is an American neuroscientist and tenured professor at Stanford University School of Medicine. He is known for his research on brain function, neuroplasticity, and how lifestyle factors like breathing and light exposure affect the brain. He often discusses science-based tools for improving mental and physical well-being. Parasympathetic nervous system is one of the two main divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the other being the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic system is often called the rest and digest system, responsible for calming the body, conserving energy, and slowing down heart rate and breathing after the stress response. Power down your devices at least an hour before sleep. Instead, write down 3 thoughts you observed during the day that weren't truly yours, scripts from media, family, or fear. Then write 1 moment you remember being fully present. These reflections, done regularly, train the nervous system to favor awareness over reactivity. From the Bhagavad Gita comes a phrase that speaks volumes here: set to very clear-minded habits. Bhagavad Gita is a 700-verse Hindu scripture that is part of the epic Mahabharata. It is a dialogue between Prince Arjuna and his guide and charioteer, Lord Krishna. It contains profound teachings on dharma, duty, karma, action, bhakti, devotion, and various paths to spiritual realization, emphasizing the importance of disciplined action and clear-mindedness. Stoicism is an ancient Greek philosophy that emphasizes virtue, reason, and resilience. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, known for his personal writings collected in Meditations. Stoic practice often involves cultivating inner calm, accepting what is outside of one's control, and focusing on one's own thoughts and actions. Awareness doesn't grow from ideas alone. It grows from how you live, what you consume, how you walk, how you speak, even how you chew your food. In Stoic practice, Marcus Aurelius used negative visualization to maintain humility and presence, imagining loss, not to suffer it, but to appreciate what is. This is another tool you can use. Visualize losing your name, your roles, your narratives. What remains? That's the witness. When you ritualize the pause, when you anchor your day in presence, the inner voice begins to soften. You stop reacting to every whisper and start noticing the silence between them. You stop chasing an identity and start feeling the space that holds all identities without clinging to any. So here's the final piece. You've seen the illusion. You've glimpsed the space behind the voice. Now comes the invitation to live from that space, not as an escape, but as your default state. Let's bring everything together in one final inquiry that could change your life, or, at the very least, help you hear your own mind with brand new ears. Just taking a moment to ask, if you're finding value in this journey so far, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. A quick comment below also makes a big difference. Really appreciate you being here. Let's continue with the episode. Remember, you are born spiritual. Let's connect the dots. You've arrived at the doorway, the moment where inquiry becomes more than a question. It becomes a way of seeing, but this isn't about conclusions. It's about untying the knot at the center of your experience. Because the final realization isn't a new belief. It's letting go of old ones, especially the most persistent of all, that the voice in your head is who you are. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor. He is the founder of logotherapy, a form of existential analysis. In his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, he describes his experiences in concentration camps and his psychotherapeutic method of finding meaning in all forms of existence, even the most bleak. Viktor Frankl, whose insights were forged in the harshest crucible imaginable, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." What he didn't need to add, because it's implied, is that the space is not empty, it's aware. That space is the witness. This is what disidentification really means. Not denial, not suppression, but noticing. You don't silence the inner voice by force. You simply stop confusing it with your essence. Thoughts arise, sure, but you are the one they arise in. Emotions come and go, but you are the field that holds them. Identity shifts, sometimes dramatically, but awareness doesn't flinch. It watches silently, lovingly. This isn't a theory, it's practice, and it's accessible. In fact, it may be happening already, right now, as you listen. A part of you is observing not just these words, but your reaction to them. Maybe you're skeptical, maybe you're intrigued, maybe you're still waiting for something, but there's a knowing behind all that. A presence that has been here through every thought, every breath, every version of you you've ever worn. That presence doesn't speak in the usual way. It doesn't argue or demand. It doesn't have to. It simply is, and it's been patiently waiting for you to notice. Not the voice in your head, but the space that hears it. So here's your real challenge. Not to analyze this further, not to debate it, but to try something radically simple. For the next 24 hours, listen to every sentence that appears in your mind. Not reactively, not judgmentally. Just listen. And each time you catch one, ask, whose voice is this, really? Is it your inner child? A teacher from the past? An Instagram reel? A fear that's not even yours? And then ask the one question that no mental voice can fully answer. Who is it that's listening? Because in that question, if you stay with it, not mentally, but as a living curiosity, you will begin to hear something deeper. Not a new voice, but a new silence. A silent witness. A presence that was never asleep, only overlooked. And maybe, just maybe, that's who your mind has been talking to all along. 5 key points to remember from today's video. Number 1. Our inner voice and thoughts often appear spontaneously and are mistakenly assumed to be our authentic self, when neuroscience suggests they are more like a ghostwriter or receiver influenced by various factors. Number 2, identity is not a fixed original essence but is performatively constructed and scripted by society, culture, language, and even algorithms, as shown by philosophy and semiotics like Butler and Barth. Number 3, the ego and its inner narrative evolved partly as an ancient survival mechanism to ensure social acceptance within tribes, which can become maladaptive in the modern, hyper-connected world focused on digital validation. Number 4, the internal voice and sense of self are not fixed, but can be reshaped through practices that leverage neuroplasticity and epigenetics, demonstrating that lifestyle and awareness can biologically influence consciousness. Number 5, altered states of consciousness, like those induced by psychedelics or deep hypnosis, and somatic practices like breathwork or Tai Chi, can reveal that the ordinary self is just one mode of awareness and allow access to a silent witness or awareness field beneath the mental chatter. The core message is that the voice in your head, the self you identify with, is largely an illusion, a narrative woven from many external and internal threads you didn't consciously author. Freedom comes not from fighting this voice, but from recognizing it for what it is, a conditioned pattern, and shifting your awareness to the silent presence or witness that observes it. This practice of disidentification, seeing the space between stimulus and response, allows you to live from a place of deeper awareness rather than being trapped by the ego's narrative scripts, opening the door to profound personal transformation. Feeling that spark? Keep the momentum alive. Tap the info card for the daily motivation playlist. Quick videos, powerful growth fuel, every day. Click the card and dive in. If the voice isn't you, then who is listening? This is the core invitation to simply notice. Now I want to hear what you are noticing. Drop a comment below and share one ghost-written thought you caught today, a script that felt borrowed, not truly yours. And describe a moment, however fleeting, when you felt the quiet presence that was just watching the mental show. Your discoveries help illuminate the path for all of us. Let's witness this unraveling as a community. If this video resonated, don't stop now. Your next insight is linked right here on the end screen. Click this video box to continue the journey. And while you're here, a quick subscribe helps keep this conversation going. Click the video, and I'll see you there.